Welcome, everyone, to the Ready for the Draft podcast. I am your host, Gregg Schutze. This is episode 21 of the 2024 podcast series, where we take a look at the draft-eligible prospects and get you ready for the NFL draft. And this is the post-combine edition, where we'll take a look at the offensive performers. How did everybody look during their workouts on Saturday and Sunday of the combine? Obviously, we had the defense in the last podcast, took a look at all the top performers. Obviously, we know that Dallas Turner, Jared Verse, Leatu Latu, and Chop Robinson all solidified their status as first rounders. We got to see some linebackers, Peyton Wilson, Edgerrin Cooper, really cementing their status as the top linebackers in this year's draft. Defensive tackles, Byron Murphy, definitely number one. T'Vondre Sweat tipped the scales at 366 pounds, but carries that weight really well, moved very well for a guy his size. And I'll tell you what, I think Quinyon Mitchell may very well end up being CB1 when it's all said and done. So now that takes us obviously to the offensive side of the football. A lot of guys to cover over those 2 days of the draft. We had the quarterbacks, running backs, and receivers on Saturday, so we'll talk about them first, and then we'll jump into the offensive line. Cover the tight ends. They were actually thrown in with the defensive backs there on Friday. So we'll go ahead and jump right into the quarterbacks. And obviously, Caleb Williams, Jayden Daniels, Drake Maye, none of them competed at the combine. In fact, Jayden Daniels showed up. They took his height and weight. I think he left. I think that was really the extent of things. We did see Caleb Williams and Drake Maye both there at the combine. I know Caleb Williams spoke with at least 8 teams. We also saw both Caleb Williams and Drake Maye down on the sideline cheering on not only their teammates throughout the combine, but also others. You saw both Caleb and Drake Maye celebrating Xavier Worthy's record-setting 4.21 40. And look, Caleb was there watching his teammates on the defensive side of the football as well. There was the concern about the medicals. Why did he not allow the medicals to be seen by all 32 teams? Essentially said, look, when I meet with those individual teams, we'll go ahead and do the medicals that way. Little unorthodox, doesn't have an agent or anything like that. So, this is a kid that's kind of marched to the beat of his own drum. And, this is just kind of another step there for Caleb Williams. But look, I think he's checked all the boxes. To me, he's still QB1. Jayden Daniels, nobody's really talking about the fact that he showed up and then turned around and left. A lot of people want to talk about Caleb Williams, but at the end of the day, to me, he's still QB1. I think the bigger question is who's QB2 between Jayden Daniels and Drake Maye. There's a lot of conversation out there, a lot of Caleb haters, a lot of people that are either pro Jayden Daniels or pro Drake Maye. And Caleb Williams, it's surprising that suddenly we go from him being the surefire number 1 overall pick to now there are those that are second guessing this and are trying to say that one or the other of the big three, if you will, one of those guys should be the ones to ultimately be that number 1 overall pick. At the end of the day, Caleb Williams should be that number 1 pick going to Chicago. But what we did get to see was the next 3. And these are all guys that have the potential to be first rounders. I think JJ McCarthy is a lock to be in round 1. I think Bo Nix has continued to impress. I think Bo Nix also round 1. And look, Michael Penix Jr., had it not been for the injuries, we'd be talking about him as one of the top prospects in this draft. But can you justify a first-round pick on a guy who was injured, season-ending injuries in his first 4 seasons at the collegiate level? That's really a scary proposition. So that's why I think he falls to day 2, unless a team like the Raiders, they get a guy like Quinyon Mitchell in round 1. They're at number 13 overall. They trade back into round 1 to get their quarterback. That's something to watch out for as well. But in terms of their performance, look, JJ McCarthy measured in a lot bigger than we were expecting at 219 pounds. He was inconsistent, at times. I think some of the touch throws, sailed those a bit, but you saw the arm strength. You saw his ability to throw the ball down the field. And then look, he runs the 3-cone drill, short shuttle. The 3-cone drill was a 6.82. Short shuttle was a 4.23. When you think about that, you look at the running backs, and if we're talking about the 3-cone drill, his 6.82 would have tied him with his teammate Blake Corum as the number 2 running back that ran that drill. And he actually ran a faster 3-cone drill than Odunze. I know Odunze was shooting for a 6.6, ends up clipping the cone. We'll get into that here in a little bit. And then if you look at the short shuttle, look, runs a 4.23. Very, very good time for a quarterback. So the athleticism obviously is there on display. Bo Nix, look, this guy has the arm strength. I thought there was also some inconsistency with some of his throws, not to the degree that we saw from JJ McCarthy. Bo Nix, 6'2", 214 pounds. He's got these bigger hands, 10 and an eighth inch versus JJ McCarthy, which is 9 inches. Caleb Williams, 9 3/4. So he's got one of the bigger sized hands. We talk about Michael Penix Jr. having those monster hands, 10.5 inches. So Bo Nix wasn't that far behind in terms of the hand size. When you talk about quarterbacks, that's been some of the debate about the hand size, being able to hold on to the football. Obviously not going to be a concern there with Bo Nix, but just this is the guy who has impressed every step of the way. The maturity. He started 61 games there at Oregon. And so I honestly believe that when you look at things, and we're going to talk about free agency and what that has done, but now that Atlanta has gotten their quarterback in Kirk Cousins, I think they're out of the mix, obviously. The Giants at 6, I think it's too rich for any of these 3 quarterbacks for the Giants to pull the trigger at 6. But I look at Minnesota at 11. I think that could be where either Bo Nix or JJ McCarthy goes, and then the other of those 2, Denver, they're going to need a quarterback as well, especially with Russell Wilson signing with Pittsburgh. And then the Raiders sitting at 13. What did they do? I know that there are some ties with Antonio Pierce and Jayden Daniels back to their time at ASU, but I just don't see the Raiders. These quarterbacks are probably going to be off the board by that time. I think the Raiders really should be looking to trade back into round 1 to get their hands on Michael Penix Jr. Who, look, Penix Jr., you see the ease with his ability to throw the football. Any of the in-breaking routes, just puts the ball right on the money, and you see the velocity. That's one of the things that he has. But there's a lot of one gear to his throws. I think that's one of the things that you see with McCarthy and really with Bo Nix. Bo Nix is able to change the speeds of his throws, has those touch throws, put it over the linebacker in front of the safety. Those touch throws on those intermediate routes, that's really where Michael Penix Jr. struggles. And, I thought we saw that a little bit there. But overall, all 3 of those quarterbacks solidified their status as quarterbacks worthy of being drafted in the first 2 rounds of this year's draft. And then Spencer Rattler. Look, he only ran a 4.9 5.40. His 3-cone drill and short shuttle weren't all the fastest, but he's not known to be a tremendous athlete. 6 foot 211. So he's one of the shorter quarterbacks in this year's draft. In fact, he is the shortest of the group that was there at the Combine. But Spencer Rattler, look, the dude can spin it. You see the anticipation on the outbreaking routes, being able to put the ball on the money. I thought that you saw the velocity there. His ability to throw the deep ball was effortless. And I think Spencer Rattler is going to end up being a guy coming off the board no later than round number 3. Could he sneak into the second round with a lot of these quarterback-needy teams? Maybe, but I think between that 3rd and 4th round is really where it makes sense, and I think ultimately we see Rattler come off the board in round number 3. Michael Pratt, 6'2", 217. Another guy, really good athlete, 36-inch vertical leap. Tied McCarthy for that 4.23 in the short shuttle as well. Some inconsistency to his game as well. In terms of the passes, a lot of the outbreaking routes, was sailing, a few of those passes. So his game really, he needs some time to develop. He's more of a project. That's why I think, if you take him on day 2, you have to be expecting to put in a little bit of time. I think ultimately he's going to fall to either round 4 or round 5. I think that's where it makes the most sense. He's got a lot of athleticism. There are a lot of tools to work with, but I think that he's still a little ways away before he's going to really be able to start at the next level. Jordan Travis, obviously, he's still working back from the injury, measured in a 6'1", 200. Another guy with 9-inch hands. I think Jordan Travis is a guy. Look, he relies a lot on that athleticism, and I think he trusts his arm a little bit too much at times. But he's a guy that I think you saw the leadership, especially with the team after everything that happened with not being able to make it into the college football playoff despite an undefeated season. I thought the way that he stepped up and really led the team through that was admirable for sure. Joe Milton, the third, look, 6'5", 235. This dude, the cannon for an arm was really on display. But you watched him with the deep ball. He looked a little uncomfortable at times throwing some of the other balls. Man, when he got to throw that deep ball, he dropped back and he waited count, allowing that receiver to get even deeper into that 9 route, and then he would just chuck it. I think it was a good 70 yards and just make it look effortless. But you didn't see any quarterbacks drop back, wait a count before getting rid of that football. Most of the quarterbacks are getting back to the back of that drop, and they're airing that football out. Joe Milton, the arm strength, I think there's going to be a team that's going to take a flyer on him. Mid to late day 3. More than likely on the back half of day 3. But that arm strength, obviously, he's got some tools to work with there. But the accuracy issues, decision making, those are things that really he's going to have to work on. And look, he's also another guy that he has one speed with all of his throws, so that's something that he's going to have to definitely dial in. I thought Devin Leary looked okay, 6'1", 215. He's really my next quarterback in this group. And look, after Spencer Rattler, there are a lot of question marks with this group. I think Rattler, there's a guarantee there that obviously Rattler's coming off the board on day 2. I still think Pratt, Milton, maybe Leary get drafted. Devin Leary, look, the inconsistency, especially at Kentucky, really surprising after a solid career at NC State. So that's one of the things that teams are going to have to figure out there. Sam Hartman, look, ran an admirable, 4'8", 40, 6'1", 211. The arm strength, you see the physical limitations, especially when he's throwing in with the rest of this group. So that's one of the things. But you are getting a leader. You're getting a guy who's very, high football IQ, a leader on the team. I think there's a chance that we could see Hartman get drafted, 6th, 7th round. More than likely, probably the 7th round, late. But he's a guy that I think could end up being a second or third quarterback at the next level. Keaton Slovis surprised. 4'5", 540, 158, 10-yard split, 6'2", 223. Tremendous athlete. Look, this is a guy that his quarterback coach in high school was Kurt Warner. Played at 3 different teams. I really think his arm was never the same after the bowl game against Iowa. AJ Epinesa hit that arm, messed up his shoulder, and then the concussions. He's had quite a few concussions. There at USC, I don't know how many times it seemed like he was getting hit and dropped in the backfield. And I think at the end of the day with it, there are some concerns. Obviously playing at USC, then moving on to Pittsburgh, then BYU, and struggled at Pittsburgh, kind of redeemed himself a little bit there at BYU, but a lot of inconsistency to his game and just not being able to stay healthy. I just don't see a team taking a flyer on him. One guy that they probably would potentially is Austin Reed because of all the production in his career. Western Kentucky, 6'1", 220, 4'8", 240. And when you look at Austin Reed, the arm talent, not on par with a lot of these other quarterbacks. Struggled at times throwing the deep ball. The trajectory was a lot flatter. And when he did kind of cut loose with it, and the ball with that higher trajectory, it just kind of hung in the air. I think with both he and Hartman and, to a lesser extent, Slovis, when they threw those deep balls, there was really some inconsistency getting the ball out there. Something that a lot of those other guys at the top end of the draft didn't really have to worry about. Austin Reed, that production, I think that's going to be intriguing. Plus, quarterbacks coming out of Tyson Helton's offense there with the Hilltoppers. Bailey Zappi, most notable. I think there's a team that may end up taking a flyer on him late on day 3, 7th round likely. or he could be an undrafted free agent. So that's really that quarterback group. I thought, like I said, JJ McCarthy, Bo Nix, Michael Penix Jr. absolutely helped themselves, as did Spencer Rattler. Question marks after that. Then we'll take a look at the running backs. Running backs will be the next group to really focus in on. And, this is a group that, look, they were a lot of fun to watch, and I think when you look at the biggest surprise was obviously Isaac Guerendo. Guerendo is 6 foot, 221 pounds, ran a 4.33 40, 1.55 10-yard split, 41.5 vertical leap. So in terms of that vertical speed, this is a guy that, and you see the physicality to his game as well. He's a guy that's surprised. I think he's going to move up draft boards for sure. My guy still is Trey Benson out of Florida State, 6 foot, 216. He's my number one running back. Ran that 4.39 40, 1.52 10-yard split. So we knew that he had the power. We saw the contact balance, and you see him accelerate from other guys. And for a guy that size to be running that 4.39 40, he's a guy that can be a home run hitter that also has that power. Then he showed good hands coming out of the backfield as well at the Combine. So I think Trey Benson definitely helped himself, and he's a guy I think people are talking about, third round. I think he could end up sneaking into the back half of round number 2 and be that first running back taken. I know Jonathan Brooks, a lot of people like him. He's my number 2 guy just because of that ACL, 6 foot, 216. Obviously the medicals, what does that knee look like? To me right now, Trey Benson is the cleaner prospect because of that, and that's why I just have him a little bit higher than Brooks in my my draft rankings right now. I think both Brooks and Benson, though, likely to come off the board in round number 2. The number 3 running back on my board is Jaylen Wright. I thought he had a solid day as well. 5'10", 210, 4.38 40, 38-inch vertical leap, 11.2 broad jump. That broad jump there was the longest of any of the group, and 38-inch, that's among the top there. Guerendo with that 41.5 vertical was number 1, and then Tyrone Tracy out of Purdue, who will get to the ex-receiver with that 40-inch vertical leap, also turning heads there. But Jaylen Wright, look, we know the explosiveness is there, and so this is a home run threat, a guy that's going to be able to get vertical and has a chance to break it open really on any time that he has the football. And look, there's not a lot of tread on those legs of his. Sharing the backfield with Jabari Small, I think Jaylen Wright has a chance to be one of the breakout performers in this year's draft. Blake Corum, 5'8", 205. You watch him in the drills, you see the shiftiness. He's quicker than he is fast. He's got the strength, the contact balance. Look, put up 225 27 times in the bench press, which was the most of any of the running backs. Ran a 4.53 40, which isn't terrible. That's about to be expected, but look, that 3-cone drill, 6.82, which was second only to Tracy. So that checks out in terms of that ability to change directions. They ran a 4.02 short shuttle. 4.12 short shuttle, which comes in towards the top of the group as well. So I thought Blake Corum showed up well. I think he's a guy that has a chance to come off the board in round number 3. I'm looking at the Chargers. Look, Austin Eckler's moved on to Washington. They did bring in Gus Edwards, but I think if you're looking for a running back that's going to fit Jim Harbaugh's offense there in LA with the Bolts, why not take his college running back in Blake Corum? I think that makes a lot of sense, and I think that checks out for sure. Some of the other guys that really turned heads, obviously, I've been talking about Tyrone Tracy out of Purdue, 5'11", 209. Look, this guy started out as a receiver at Iowa, ultimately at Purdue, thrust into that running back spot, ran a 4.48 40, 1.53 10-yard split, 40-inch vertical leap, 4.06 short shuttle, 6.81 was the top there in the 3-cone drill. So we knew that the athleticism was there. This guy has hands like a receiver. A guy, you put him through a gauntlet and he's just, he's not going to slow down. He trusts his hands. He's one of those guys that could be a sleeper day 3 guy. You think about Antonio Gibson, who was a receiver there at Memphis, turned running back. Cordero Patterson, another guy who was a receiver, drafted as a receiver and a return guy, became a running back. Ty Montgomery, another guy who was a receiver in college, turned running back. I think there's a chance, that we could see, Tyrone Tracy follow that same model there. Marshawn Lloyd out of USC. This is another guy. Look, I've got him in my top 5 in the running backs out of 5'9", 220 pounds. Ran a 4.46 40, 36-inch vertical leap, put up 225, 25 times. And Lloyd, again, quicker. I think he's quicker than he is fast, which is crazy because he runs that 4.46, so a lot, quicker, or a lot, the vertical speed was absolutely there. A little bit more build-up speed. Ran a 1.56 10-yard split. Not horrible, but in this group, when you have a bunch of guys running that 1.51, it's not up to that same level. But you saw the quick feet, especially in the drills, and then you saw his ability to catch the football out of the backfield. That checks out as well. I think Marshawn Lloyd is the guy that could hear his name called as early as round number 3, but he'll be an early day 3 guy at the minimum. I think as I continue to look through the group, other guys that really jumped out at me. I felt bad for Cody Schrader, 5'8", 202, ran a 4.61 40. He's another guy that, look, he gets stronger as the game goes along. He's not the fastest guy, but the contact balance and then the hands. Unfortunately, he had an injury, and so he wasn't able to perform like he wanted to. Kimani Vidal, ran that 4.46 40, 37-inch vertical leap. The 3-cone drill was not nearly what we were expecting. Ran a 7.01. So this is a guy. Look, he's got good hands. We saw that in the drills. But that lack of that agility, he's more of a straight line runner. So I was kind of surprised, to see just how slow that time was. I wasn't expecting to be nearly that slow. Same with George Holani out of Boise State. Look, 5'10", 208. Look, this is a guy. He's got some good power to his game. Put up 225, 24 times, so that checks out. Ran a 4.5 240, 39-inch vertical leap, so he's got some of that lower body explosiveness. Ran a 7.32, 3-cone drill, and then short shuttle at a 4.33. So, some of that change of direction, there may be some concern there. I think Holani is going to be in the mix there on day 3. I thought Isaiah Davis, another big back, 6 foot, 218, 4.57 40. This guy put up 225 23 times. Big back, showed off some decent hands. Ray Davis out of Kentucky, another guy, 5'8", 211. Only 8 7/8 inch hands. Got some of the smaller hands in this group, and ran a 4.52 40. Ran a 4.51 3-cone drill, which was short shuttle, slowest of the group. But this is a guy that I think still, because of the power, has decent speed and really good hands. He's got that versatility. I think he'll be an early day 3 guy. Same thing with Bucky Irving. You look at him, 5'9", 192, 4.55 40. So he's quicker. Again, another guy that's quicker than he is fast. He can make you miss in the open field. Not a guy that's necessarily going to run away from you. But then you only saw a 29.5-inch vertical leap. So, some concerns there potentially with that lower body explosiveness. Only a 9.7 broad jump as well. So he's one of those guys that will probably send people back to the film. Want to take another look at him. Make sure that because the measurements and the times didn't really match the film, in my opinion. Dylan Lobby out of New Hampshire. Look, this guy continues to check off the boxes. As a Danny Woodhead type, 5'10", 206, ran a 4.5 240, 6.8 4.3 cone drill, 4.02, short shuttle, 23 reps in the bench press. So he's got good strength, 37-inch vertical leap. This guy, has decent speed, but that shiftiness. You see that with the route running ability. You see his ability to sink those hips, and one of the better route runners in this draft class. He's a guy that could be one of those sleepers, and I'm really looking forward to seeing more of what he could do. The biggest surprise, I think, was Audric Estime. 5'11", 221 pounds. So again, one of the bigger running backs, but he runs a 4.71 40. Now look, that 4.71, he plays a lot faster than that. And the thing with it is I think he'll run faster at Notre Dame's Pro Day. I look at some of the other numbers: 38-inch vertical leap, 10.5 broad jump, so he's got that lower body explosiveness. Put up 225 23 times, so he's got the power. He is a power back, but I think he plays a lot faster. I think that 4.71, I'm looking to see what he can do there at his Pro Day. I think he'll run a lot faster, But look, that 40 time, as much as everyone says you just trust the tape, when a guy runs a 4.7, then the question then becomes, can you justify taking him on day 2 of the draft? And that's really a big question mark. I just don't know that teams are going to be willing to do that. I think he'll be a guy that'll end up coming off the board early on day 3 right now. Let's see what he does in terms of that overall speed, and see what he can turn out. I think he's a guy though that is we should be keeping an eye on, because everybody has him in their top 5, and after a 4.71, I think some teams may just move him down on the board a little bit. Is he more of just a power guy? Is he a guy that change of pace, but can he really carry the load? Is he a guy that can bust off some big runs? That could be a potential question mark. I mean, that 38-inch vertical leap isn't surprising when you see a guy his size hurdling guys there at the, I can't remember which game it was, but he hurdled basically a guy that was almost standing, and so that 38-inch vertical leap absolutely checks out. So that's really where I'm at with the running backs. I thought that was a group that obviously, Trey Benson really set the stage there for this group. I thought Jaylen Wright looked solid. So did Blake Corum, Marshawn Lloyd. Those are the guys that really checked off all the boxes for me. I think it matched a lot of the game film, and so those are guys that will continue to be at the top of this group. Wide receivers. This is a wide receiver group that is going to be could go down as one of the best wide receiver classes we've seen in the draft. You look at, obviously, Marvin Harrison Jr. did not work out. He's even said, I'm not working out at the pro day. I'm just going to wait until my rookie season. That's really what I'm gearing up for. So we're not going to see him work out at all. And then, obviously, Malik Nabers also was not there at the Combine. 6 foot 200. He showed up and did some measurements, and then essentially left shortly thereafter. So similar to Jayden Daniels, but Odunze. This is what I love about Odunze. He said, you know what? I'm not afraid of that at all. I'm going to go ahead and show up. And I thought Odunze was a guy that absolutely checked off every single one of the boxes. Measured in a 6'3", 212. So, the big physical nature to this guy's game. Ran a 4.45 40, which is phenomenal for a guy his size. 1.52 10-yard split. Ran that 4.03 short shuttle, which was second only to Luke McCaffrey, surprisingly. Luke McCaffrey we'll get to as one of those guys that really turned heads. But Odunze ran that 6.88 3-cone drill. And what was remarkable with it was, even after everybody left, nobody else was on the field. And the NFL Network was talking about how he stayed on the field. They showed him continuing to run that 4, 5, 6 times. And he wanted to break 6.6. And every time when he made that last turn around the cone, he would clip it with his foot and just could not quite get that 6.6. He says, look, that's what I'm shooting for. You saw that in his social media posts, that he's going for sub 6.6 at his pro day. We'll be excited to see exactly what it is that he can do. Just for context, there at the Combine, fastest was a 6.64 Ricky Pearsall. So obviously if he runs sub 6.6, that would be the fastest of anybody that was there at the Combine. So, but with Odunze, is he wide receiver 1? Is he wide receiver 2? You see him, and look, he may not be quite as quick as Malik Nabers, but he's the size, the physicality. He does have the speed. This is a guy that can he can jump. He checks off literally all the boxes. The route running ability. If he went number 1 in terms of the receivers, number 4 overall to Arizona, I would not be upset one bit. I think Odunze is the real deal there in terms of the wide receiver position. And, I think if he falls at all in that top 10, he can end up being the steal of that group, that group of 3 there at the top. Other guys, look, Brian Thomas Jr., another guy that had a chance to really perform with the absence of some of those top guys. 6'3", 209, and ran a 4.3 340 with a 1.5 10-yard split, 38-inch vertical leap. Checks off boxes there as that vertical threat. You saw that time and time again in LSU's offense. Getting vertical, getting behind defenders, making deep catches, looks smooth. through the gauntlet. He's a guy to me that, you look at the top end of that draft, and Gabe Davis went to Jacksonville. The Colts pick up Michael Pittman Jr. They end up re-signing him. Cleveland, though, T. Higgins has asked for a trade. Depending on whether or not, Cincinnati. If Cincinnati picks up an offensive tackle, because I think tackle's still going to be their biggest concern. They need a right tackle. If Cincinnati gets a tackle in free agency, then I think really the next step would be to go ahead and get your receiver to replace T. Higgins. And I think Brian Thomas Jr. would absolutely be a guy for that. I thought the two Texas guys, Adonai Mitchell, Xavier Worthy. Look, Adonai Mitchell, 6'2", 205. I think they had him at 6'4". At Texas, so actually came in a couple of inches shorter than that, but at that size ran a 4.3 440, which is phenomenal. 39.5-inch vertical leap, 11.4 broad jump. Tremendous athlete. I think the biggest concern that I have for Adonai Mitchell is simply just the fact that he didn't dominate. You can see the route running, you see the vertical nature, you see the athleticism. This is a guy that can be a red zone nightmare as well, but he wasn't consistently dominant on the field at either Georgia or Texas. I know at Georgia he battled some injuries. Goes to Texas, and when he was right, but he wasn't always at the top of his game. And that's the biggest worry that I have. Is he going to be a first rounder? With that size, running a 4.34, yeah, he's probably going to be a late one. I think that makes the most sense for him. But, he's one of those guys that is kind of a boomer bust for me. I mean, really the same goes for Xavier Worthy. 5'11", 168, ran that 4.2 140, which, is the fastest 40 time in the history of the Combine. And, outruns, John Ross. If you look at any of the guys that ran those really fast 40 times, none of those guys really had successful NFL careers. John Ross, obviously battled some injuries, was a top 10 pick. Is Worthy going to end up being a first rounder? I think because of the speed, there's a great chance that he will. 149, 10-yard split, 41-inch vertical leap, 10-foot, 11-inch broad jump. I think he plays with some toughness, tries to play bigger than his size. But look, the issue there that I have with him is, he's not a natural pass catcher. He's really not. The vertical game is absolutely there. The route running is okay. But I think there are better options. This is a guy that can be easily rerouted. And that's obviously going to be a concern at the next level. You're basically talking about a guy that really should be playing in the slot. Do you want to take him at the back end of round number 1? The Chiefs sitting there at 32, I think would be the only team that can pull the trigger on Xavier Worthy. But if I'm the Chiefs and Lab McConkey sitting there, I'd be hard pressed, to take the Georgia receiver over Xavier Worthy. McConkey 6', 186, 4.39 40, 152 10-yard split. Those are numbers that rival Garrett Wilson. I saw that there were a couple of guys on X that were making that comparison, and I love that comparison. And I wish I had who it was. I think it might have been Ian Cummings that may have made that comparison, and I think it absolutely checks out. I mean, when you look at the size and the speed, everything, the route running ability, you start thinking Lab McConkey could end up being a first-round pick. Look, Georgia, they had the balanced offensive attack. McConkey was battling some injuries. But to me, if he had been the focal point of that offense, been that number 1 target, he'd be putting up numbers where we'd be talking about him in the middle to upper half of that draft. And I think as it is, he's a guy, look, Chiefs there at 32, he can probably even sneak up even higher. I honestly think he doesn't get past Carolina sitting there at the top of round number 2. McConkey, to me, absolutely checks off your boxes there for sure. I thought Roman Wilson and Ricky Pearsall were two others that definitely, I think, solidify their status as potential second rounders. Roman Wilson, 5'11", 185, 4.39 40. Then Ricky Pearsall, dude, 6'1", 189, 4.41, 40, a little bit more of a build-up speed, ran a 1.57, 10-yard split, but a 42-inch vertical leap, and that 6.64 three-cone drill and a 4.05 short shuttle. So this tells me this guy's got vertical speed, he's got the ability to go up and high point the football, and then that route running ability, again, the ability to change directions and not really lose any speed. Checks off the boxes when you watch the film. And with Roman Wilson, again, another guy that's very sudden in and out of his breaks. You see the vertical speed as well. So, Roman Wilson and Ricky Pearsall, guys that are in my top 10 in terms of this wide receiver group. I thought Xavier Legette looked solid as well. 6'1", 221, big physical receiver, obviously. 4.39 40 with a 40-inch vertical leap. Tremendous athlete. Really good hands. The biggest question mark is this was a guy, he matched all of his production there at South Carolina within like the first game or two of his senior season. Had a breakout year. That's really the biggest question mark is this just a one-hit wonder, or are we going to see a guy that's just getting started? Devontae Walker, I thought, had a solid combine. 6'1.5", 193, 4.36 40, 40.5 vertical leap, 11.2 broad jump. Look, this was a guy that became Drake Maye's go-to target as soon as he became eligible. Obviously, he had those concerns. He was ineligible because he was transferred to two schools. Kent State, he was a solid receiver there, and then you saw him really emerge. Had some issues with the hands at times, but I think this guy had the athleticism. Second, third round. I wouldn't be. I think first round is going to be a little bit too rich, but I could see him absolutely get drafted on in round number 2. I mentioned Luke McCaffrey, 6'2", 198, ran a 4.46 40, 1.52 10-yard split, 36-inch vertical leap, 6.7 three-cone drill, and a 4.02 short shuttle. So what this tells me is that he's got better vertical speed than you would expect. He's got pretty good hops. And the ability, the route running. He's got some quicks like his brother. Really, football is in the DNA. But then you also watch his hands, the contested catches, his ability to out-muscle guys. Be able to put his body in a position to make the catch on a ball and put that defender on his back. McCaffrey, to me, is a guy that I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up coming off the board. Late on day number 2. Man, wouldn't it be something if he could get drafted by the San Francisco 49ers and play with his brother Christian? I think it could absolutely happen. Look, he's a guy that kind of fits that same tough mold of the 49ers. Receiver though is not a position of need there, but I think in terms of the value and looking at a guy that could end up playing a pivotal role for your team, that's something that you could definitely be getting there with Luke McCaffrey. Again, a lot of guys that looked really solid in this group. Jacob Cowling out of Arizona, 5'8", 168, ran a 4.38 40. Really slow in terms of the short shuttle, the three-cone drill. That was a bit of a surprise because I thought this guy was very quick. You watch him with his route running. To me, he looks like a guy that could end up being this year's Tank Dell. Just, again, really surprised in terms of the times, but I think that's something you watch Arizona's Pro Day. I think he'll be able to turn those times around. He's one of those guys, put him in the slot, let him go to work. Anthony Gould is kind of the, if you don't get a guy like Jacob Cowing, stay in the Pac-12, go after Oregon State's Gould at 5'8", 174. These guys are not the biggest dudes by any means, but man, they're quick, they're fast. 4.39 40, 1.49 10-yard split, 39.5-inch vertical leap. So he plays a lot bigger than his size. And the biggest thing was when you watched him in the gauntlet, he wasn't nearly as smooth. Because he kind of throttled down a bit, so he doesn't seem to trust his hands as much as maybe some other guys. And when I say that, I'm definitely talking about Keon Coleman, 6'3", 213 out of Florida State. When we look at Coleman, you watch that 40 time, ran a 4.61, which was obviously really disappointing for him, for sure. Because how many receivers actually get drafted in round number 1 after running a 4.61? I think eyes will be on him at Florida State's Pro Day. Can he get into that 4.5 range? 4.53. Look, that's what Mike Evans ran at the Combine when he ran. So that's something to keep an eye out for sure. But 38-inch vertical leap, basketball player. This is a guy that can go up and get it. But when you watched him at the Gauntlet, and this is something that people talk about with Puka Nacua having the fastest GPS. He was so confident in his hands. Keon Coleman had the fastest GPS there at the Combine for receivers, per Pro Football Focus, and the NFL Network. He just looked so fast going through those drills, or through that drill, down the line, making catches, disposing of the football, making the next catch. Made it look so easy and effortless. If he falls to day 2, this is a guy that can end up being that sleeper. And teams could be left saying, "Man, I wish I would have taken Keon Coleman." So he'll be a guy to definitely be on the watch for. The flip side, look, Troy Franklin, 6'2", 176. Not the biggest guy by any means. A lot of people have him coming off the board in round 1. I'm not one of them. He ran a 4.4 140, but a 1.61 10-yard split. So a guy that has some of that build-up speed, if you will. But a guy that definitely can get vertical. I think his hands, he struggles at times with tracking the football. You see that, on some of his deep balls. You watch him in the Gauntlet. The guy's weaving all over the place. You're supposed to run right down that line. That's what teams are looking for, and he was all over the place, just weaving in and out. To me, he's one of those guys that you worry about his the productivity and such. Yes, he's a vertical threat. He has good the size in terms of the height. Very thin though, so another guy that you worry about potentially getting rerouted. So to me, Troy Franklin is a bit of a question mark. I thought Cornelius Johnson out of Michigan definitely helped himself. 6'3", 212, 4'4", 440. I think when you talk about Michigan, you talk about the receivers, you really talk about Roman Wilson and the fact that Cornelius Johnson was more of a possession guy, but he showed much better speed than I think everyone was expecting. So I think that's definitely going to improve his draft stock. Jalen McMillan and Jalen Polk out of Washington State. With Jalen McMillan, forgotten man. 6'1", 197, has 10-inch hands, which are among the biggest in this group. And that 4.47 40, he's a guy that can definitely get vertical. His times in the 3-cone and the short shuttle, not the fastest in the group by any means, but he's a guy that I think will continue to surprise, and I think he's a guy that, for me, is going to continue to move up the draft boards, especially through Washington's Pro Day. Jalen Polk, 6'1", 203, ran a 4.52 40, which isn't bad for him, especially he runs a 1.52 10-yard split, so he gets out more of that suddenness to his game than Jalen McMillan. A guy that I think could be a threat there on the outside. Javon Baker out of UCF, 37-inch vertical leap. A guy that's going to be that vertical threat going and attacking the football. 6'1", 202, 4.5 440. His game isn't he's not a burner by any means, but I think he's a solid route runner. I think he's also a guy that's going to go up and high point the football. That's really what you were expecting to see there. Look, Brendan Rice out of USC at 6'2", 208, bigger receiver, big hands, 9 5/8 inch hands, but then 33-inch arms as well, so he's got long arms. Ran a 4.5 40. I think he's a guy that can end up running sub 4.5. I think he's one of those guys that could be a vertical threat. Double-digit touchdowns for he and Caleb Williams. I wanted to say there's 12 of them just this past season. A guy that I think has really cleaned up things with his hands. So definitely a guy to be on the lookout for. Johnny Wilson out of Florida State. Long strider. But surprisingly ran a 1.55 10-yard split to go with that 4.52 40. Ran a 4.11 short shuttle, which was really surprising for a guy his size, a 6'6", 231. Wingspan is freaking huge for this dude. So obviously the catch radius is out of this world. 35 and 3/8 inch arms. At 6'6", 231. This is a guy. Look, he's working out with the receivers, but again, I think about him and Darren Waller. I just think that tight end would be the better position overall for him. I think right now you think about a guy like Kelvin Benjamin. That's a name that comes to mind if he stays there at that wide receiver spot. Isaiah Williams out of Illinois, 5'9", 182, ran the slowest 40 time of anybody in the group, 4.63. but a 38-inch vertical leap, 6.75 in the 3-cone drill. So this is a guy that, again, is going to be more sudden and quick than he is fast. I think he does want to get that 4.63 time, get that down a little bit, but he's a guy that could be one of those sleepers. Malik Washington out of Virginia, 5'8", 191, 4.4, 740, 42.5-inch vertical leap, 19 reps in the bench press. So he was a guy that I thought came into this as a guy that has a potential to be a late day 2 or early day 3 guy, and I think he just checked off the box there, and a guy that, hey, absolutely we're going to see that. Devon Vele out of Utah, 6'4", 203, a guy that I honestly am not sure if he's going to get drafted or not, but I thought he definitely helped himself with a 4.4, 740 at that size. That's a really good time, getting sub 4.5. 33.5-inch arms, 36-inch vertical leap. Look, Vele was a guy that could get down the field for Bryson Barnes and company. And look, when Cam Rising needed a big play, obviously he'd look at his tight ends, but receiver-wise, Devon Vele was always going to be that go-to guy for him. Jermaine Burton was a vertical threat out of Alabama, 6'1", 196, 4.4, 540, 1.53 10-yard split, 38.5-inch vertical leap, 11.1 broad jump. So this guy definitely explosive, a guy that we know is going to get vertical in a hurry. He's a guy to definitely watch out for sure. Jaquan Jackson out of Tulane, 5'9", 188, slot guy for sure. Runs a 4.4, 340. Looked really smooth in the gauntlet. That was one of the things that I thought was impressive. He did not slow down. Was just very confident in those hands. Ran a 4.35 short shuttle, I think, and then a 7 flat 3-cone drill. So I think those are going to be things that we're going to see. Can he improve upon those at his pro day? But those were the receivers that stood out for me when I watched all of this, and I'm really looking forward to seeing some pro days, seeing where everything falls. But again, big winners for me: Rome Odunze, Brian Thomas Jr., obviously Xavier Worthy with that 40 time, but Lab McConkey, Roman Wilson, Ricky Pearsall, Luke McCaffrey. Just the list goes on and on of guys that I thought had solid days, and really a fast group, very athletic group, and this has the makings of being a very special wide receiver group. So I thought that definitely checked the box off at the Combine for sure. Which now takes us to the offensive line, the big daddies in the trenches. And look, this was a group that, again, a lot of fun to watch. We got to see some guys in action, and obviously there were the standouts and some guys that left us scratching our heads a little bit. And then there were guys that basically sent us back to the tape to say, we really need to study this a little bit further. Joe Alt out of Notre Dame, I think, solidified his status as the number 1 tackle. 6'9", 321, 34.25-inch arms, 5.05 40, 179 10-yard split, 731 short shuttle, which was among the fastest in this group. 27 reps in the bench press with those long arms. Yeah, that's strong enough for me. The converted tight end looked very athletic in the drills. Whether it was the mirror drill, moving that shuffle. You just saw the overall athleticism out of Joe Alt, and he's a top 10 pick. I think he solidified that status absolutely. There's no question about that. Taliese Fuaga at 6'6", 324, arms on a little bit of a shorter side, at 33 and an 1/8 inch arms, but 5'1", 340, 32-inch vertical leap, which isn't bad for the offensive line as well. Fuaga, though, you see the power. That's one of the things that absolutely jumps off that to you. And this is a guy that understands angles. You watch him, a lot of different angles that this guy likes to take. I think when I look at where he can come off the board, I think 14 with the Saints is really the floor for him. I think he can end up coming off the board really as early as number 6 to the Giants if they decide to go O-line. The Chargers, 5 might be a little bit too rich. If the Chargers want to trade down and go after a right tackle, then I think that Fuaga can end up being that guy. Then you take a look at Olu Fashanu. Look, 6'6", or I'm sorry, Fashanu. 6'6", 312 pounds, 34-inch arms, really small hands though, which was really surprising. 8.5-inch hands. the only guy with hands that are smaller than 9 inches. So could that be a potential concern for NFL teams? Ran a 5'1", 140. Looked like a good athlete overall. That was something that definitely jumped out. But then he gets hurt. I think it was a quad injury that ultimately knocked Fashanu out for the remainder of the day. So he's one of those guys, especially with the way that some of these guys perform in drills. You want to see if he can rise to the occasion there at the pro day. Hopefully he'll be healthy enough to go ahead and run at the pro day. If there's anyone that surprised and really kind of solidified his status as a guy that should be in the top half of round number 1, and a guy that probably solidified his status as a tackle first, that's Troy Fautanu, Washington. 6'4", 317 pounds. Look, 34.5-inch arms, so he's got the length. 5'0", 140, 171, 10-yard split, and then the athleticism. Look, this is another guy that you watch the angles, you watch the different sets, whether it's out of 45, you watch the jump sets. This guy does a little bit of everything, and when he gets out in space, you watch the change of direction. You watch his ability to throttle down, be under control, and absolutely deliver a huge blow to the defender, and then just keep on going. I think Fautanu, could he come off the board in the top 16 picks? Absolutely. Could the Saints use him there at 14? Sure. I think he's one of those guys that is a bona fide first rounder. Will he fall? I think there's a good chance that you could see him fall as a result. I think Seattle sitting there at number 16. There is questions. There are questions along the interior of that line. Abraham Lucas right now is that right tackle, and Fautanu come in right away, play a guard, which I think is where everyone is expecting him to play. But if you run into any issues outside a tackle, he has that versatility to bounce outside as well in a pinch. I mean, he's this year's Elijah Vera Tucker. That's really what it boils down to for sure. Tyler Guyton, 6'8", 322 pounds, another guy with over 34-inch arms. So again, checks out in terms of the length. 5'1", 940, 34.5-inch vertical leap. I was actually expecting him to run a little bit faster, but again, the lateral agility for his game, definitely checking off some boxes. Looked pretty smooth in the drills. Christian Haynes, if we're talking about guards, 6'3", 317, 5'0", 340. He's a guy, look, I think day 2, second round, early third, definitely makes a lot of sense. Cooper Beebe, another guy, look, 6'3", 322, runs a 5'0", 340, 7'4", 3 cone drill. When I look at Cooper Beebe, this is a dude that just, he looks to light you up and drill you. And that 5'0", 340, when you watch him get out and pull, that makes a hell of a lot of sense. I think his chances of playing any tackle at the next level, slim to none. 31.5-inch arms, super short. I know that there's still a chance, hey, there are guys that can't play that with the shorter arms, but Cooper Beebe is a guy that I think is a Pro Bowl caliber guard in his future. So he's a guy to definitely keep an eye out for sure. I thought Brandon Coleman at TCU helped himself at 6'4", 313, 34 5/8-inch arms, huge hands, 10 3/4 inches, runs a 4.99 40, 34-inch vertical leap. Much better athlete than I think everyone was expecting. This guy has some positional versatility as well. Played both tackle and guard for the Horned Frogs. He's a guy that I think that mid-day 3, 5th round makes a lot of sense to me. Graham Barton, Duke, 6'5", 313. Battling some injuries, so he didn't run any of the drills. 32 and 7/8-inch arms. So again, another guy with those shorter arms. I think he's still a guy that has a chance to play tackle, but really the interior of that line, he does have that five position versatility. He played center there at Duke. I think guard is ultimately where everyone is kind of slotting him right now. I think that does make a lot of sense. Either of those spots, and Graham Barton is one of those guys that we are absolutely going to be talking about as a potential Pro Bowler early in his career, because he's just such a technician, and that's one of the things that has always impressed me with his game is his ability. He's so smart. He understands angles. You watch him against Jared Verse. He learned from some of his mistakes. He ran. He had some of those, some of the reps where he lost. He learned from those and made sure that he adjusted his game to account for that. And when I look at a guy like Rashawn Slater, right? So we look at Barton at 6'5", 313. Rashawn Slater 6'4" and a quarter, 304. 33-inch arms, so look, an eighth of an inch difference. He ran a 4.88 40 with a 1.68 10-yard split at the combine. 33-inch vertical leap, then also 33 reps in the bench press. Grant Barton, big question mark there. What are the measurements going to look like? Is he going to be able to run through and at Duke's Pro Day? Just curious to see the type of athlete that he is. But look, Rashawn Slater, and Barton feels like one of those guys that's a safe pick, much like Rashawn Slater was coming out of Northwestern, right? And Slater was ultimately taken with 13th overall pick. I think Barton. Look, Steelers need a center. So does Miami. 2021, I could absolutely see that. I think the Bucks also need a center and a guard, so that's another potential landing spot there for Grant Barton. So he'll be a guy on Duke's Pro Day that I'm going to be looking out for. Want to see what he can do there for sure. Really an intriguing dude. That's no doubt about that. Zach Frazier. This guy, battling back from an injury and was still out there running the drills. 6'3", 313, put up 30 reps in the bench press. I think Zach Frazier checks off the boxes as a day 2 pivot. I think there's no doubt about that. Makes a lot of sense. Jordan Morgan checks off boxes with his athleticism, 6'5", 311, 32 and 7/8 inch arms. A guy that can play tackle makes more sense, especially with that lack of overall length to kick inside to guard. But he has a chance to be a first rounder. I look at the 49ers there at 31 overall. Could potentially see Jordan Morgan going there. Amarius Mims, Georgia, the mammoth dude, 6'8", 340, 36 and 1/8 inch arms. Somehow runs a 5.07 40 with that size. Ends up getting injured, so we didn't get to see him going through the drills. Look, he gets injured there at the combine. This guy just keeps getting injured. That's the biggest concern I have, is that can we keep him on the field? That's going to be the biggest question mark that I think teams are going to be asking. 2 other big tackles that I thought had solid days. Kingsley Suamataia, they're at a BYU, 6'5", 326 pounds, over 34-inch arms. That checks out, 5.04 40. 31 reps in the bench press. This is the dancing bear, as he calls himself. And when you watch him, the athleticism definitely on display. I think he's one of those guys that is a bit raw. I wouldn't take him in round 1, but he's definitely a dude that's coming off the board in that round 2 range. I think that makes a ton of sense. Patrick Paul, Houston, 6'7", 331, 36 and a quarter inch arms. We knew he had the long wingspan. Dude has longer arms than Amarius Mims, but 5'1", 340, 30 reps in the bench press with those 36-inch arms. This dude is strong. The length is there as well, and he moves pretty well for a dude his size. So Patrick Paul, to me, I think solidified his status as a second-round tackle. And then Roger Rosengarten out of Washington, 6'5", 308. 33.5-inch arms. I think he's really trying to put that national title game, in his rearview mirror. Awful tape there with a lot of his reps, but he has a lot of really good tape over his career. A guy that could be a starting right tackle at the next level. I'm looking at the Rams. Obviously, you're going to have to think about a day when Rob Havenstein retires. I think Rosengarten makes a lot of sense for that team. 4.92 40, 1.73 10-yard split. The athleticism was definitely on display. I think there's no doubt about that. Other guys, to make mention of, I thought Mason McCormick out of South Dakota State. Really, both of the South Dakota State guys, looked very athletic. With McCormick, 6'4", 309, 5.08 40, 35.5-inch vertical leap, 4.45 short shuttle. No surprise that this dude, he just continues to impress. You saw him at the East-West Shrine game, and the power to his game, plays with excellent leverage. And then Garrett Greenfield is his teammate there with the Jackrabbits, 6'6", 311, 5'2", 240, but that 38.5-inch vertical leap was a record for offensive linemen. So Duke definitely has some hops. Better than expected athleticism. I think there's no doubt there. Christian Mahogany out of Boston College, battling that knee injury, but I think he's all the way back now. 6'3", 314, 10.5-inch hands. The meat hooks there really locks in on you. 5'1", 340, had a 32.5-inch vertical leap, 4.53 short shuttle, which is a solid time there among that offensive line. So definitely a guy that I was not surprised. Bo Limmer out of Arkansas was another dude. 6'5", 302, runs a 5'2", 240, but 175 10-yard split, which isn't bad. But then you see the 36.5-inch vertical leap, followed by 39 reps in the bench press. He's a guy that can be a guard or a center, so that positional versatility with Bo Limmer. Mid-day 3 guy, you're going to end up getting a starter there at the next level. Hunter Nourzad is a guy out of Penn State that I think is one of the better centers in this year's draft. Look, people slept on Juice Scruggs, and you see what he's doing now there with Houston. 6'3", 317, over 33-inch arms, and then 10 and 3/4 inch hands. He's got huge hands, not as big as Jordan Morgan, who had 10 and 7/8 inch hands. The biggest of this group, actually. But Nourzad didn't work out, so he's a guy that obviously teams are going to be looking to see what he does there at Penn State's Pro Day. Fastest among the group, Frank Crum out of Wyoming, 6'8", 313, sub 34-inch arms, but I don't think that would be an issue. 4'9", 440 with a 169 10-yard split. The athleticism is absolutely there. He's a guy that's going to be sending people back to the film, watch the Cowboy game tape a little bit further, and say, is this the guy that we may want to take a flyer on day 3? Karan Amagaje, they're out of Yale, 6'5", 323, 36 and an eighth inch arm length. Didn't time or go through those drills, but I thought that just looking at the overall measurements, definitely something that is going to turn some heads for sure. Gottlieb Ayedze out of Maryland, look, 6'4", 308. Ran a 5'01", We were expecting to see some of that athleticism. A guy that I think will play guard at the next level. I think he's definitely raised his draft stock. Tanner Bortolini. We know that this guy's an athlete. He's played multiple positions there for the Badgers. 6'4", 303. Short arms, just 31.5-inch arms. Runs a 4'9", 440, 169 10-yard split. 4.28 short shuttle, which was I think the fastest in the group. 7.16 3-cone drill, also fastest. Just 21 reps in the bench press, among the lower side there with this group. He's a guy that, that strength, though, is a big issue. Yes, you're athletic. Yes, you can get out and pull and do some of those things. But time and time again, you watch him in the one-on-ones there at the Senior Bowl. Could not anchor, getting driven back into the backfield. But because of his athleticism, I think there may be a team that, looking at him early day 3, early to mid day 3, say, what, if we could put add some size, some strength to him, we could have a starting center on our hands. So that's going to make things interesting, I think, for sure. Looking at, is there anybody else really to make mention of? Jackson Powers Johnson didn't run a 40, but 6'3", 328, 32-inch vertical leap, 30 reps in the bench press. He's obviously the top, pure center in this draft, and a guy that I think has a great chance to be a first rounder. You saw the physicality to his game. You also see the athleticism getting out on the move, and he's a guy that's just going to continue to check off all the boxes. Would not surprise me if we see Jackson Powers Johnson in round number 1 when it's all said and done. Dominic Pooney out of Kansas. Look, 6'5", 313, ran a 5'3", 540. So obviously, when you look at that, you're like, oh, that's not the fastest by any means. 186 10-yard split. But then you watch the lateral agility. That's a 4.4 3-cone drill, which when we look at that, that's second, actually third. Tanner Bortolini ran the 4.28, and Dylan McMahon, the guard center, they're out of NC State, the interior linemen. Those were the only two that were faster. So when you look at Pooney, I think the 40 time, the 10-yard split, to me isn't nearly as concerning when you see that lateral agility. You put him there at that guard spot. He's a guy that, look, didn't give up any sacks there at Kansas. He's a guy to me that could end up coming off the board as early as maybe the third round. I don't think second round. I've seen some people say that. I just don't know that that's going to be the case. Some guys that surprising for me. Andrew Rame out of Oklahoma, 5'4", 240, only 7'11" broad jump, 6'4", 314. Didn't look like very athletic at all. Kind of surprising there. KT Leviston out of Kansas State, 6'4", 326. Good length, arm length. Ran a 5'3", 840. He's a guy to me that I think would have to kick inside to guard, but the athleticism just wasn't there for me when I was watching him, especially in the drills. He just looked like a guy that was kind of plodding along for me. Jeremy Flax out of Kentucky, 6'5", 343 pounds, big dude, runs a 5'6", 440, 196 10-yard split. Look, I know you can't necessarily look at that because Orlando Brown Jr. Ran that slow 40 time, and now we know he's an all-pro caliber offensive tackle. Jeremy Flax didn't have that pedigree coming into the combine, so I think when you look at those stats, teams are going to be going back to the game film and saying, is this truly the player that we're getting, and how comfortable are we? So that's really was kind of a big concern there. I thought Javon Foster out of Missouri, 6'5", 313, 34 and 5/8 inch arms. He's got the length. We know that the power is his game. 32.5 inch vertical leap is not bad at all for a guy his size. You look at him, he's a guy that, he looks like a dude when he's coming off the bus. Ran a 5'3", 40, 179, 10-yard split, so definitely not among the fastest in this group. He's not the most athletic. He's more of that strength, power, base. A guy that, is he a left tackle? Probably not. I think at the next level, though, you move him over to the right side. That could ultimately be where Javon Foster ends up playing at the next level. I think he is a starting caliber right tackle at the next level for sure as well. So that takes care of the offensive line. You look at the specialists, didn't really get to see them working out. But look, for me, Torrey Taylor is the number one guy in this group. I know a lot of people love Joshua Carty there at Stanford, but Torrey Taylor, what he was able to do, flipping the script there for Iowa, he's my number one guy there. Will Reichard, Harrison Mevis, I think both have a chance to get drafted as well. Harrison Mevis, a thicker kicker, 6', 241. He's clutch, man. That's really the biggest thing. He struggles on some of the shorter kicks, but that 61-yarder against K-State that really catapulted Mizzou into, hey, this is a contending team in the SEC. That's really where teams started to take notice, and really the national media started to take notice as well. He's a guy to me that I think can end up being a mid to late day 3 pick as well. So that wraps up the combine for now. And look, we're going to get into free agency. I think as free agency goes forward, there are going to be a lot of conversations that need to be had. We need to really go through and take a look at some of these different moves that have been made and what that means for the NFL draft and what teams are probably looking for in their first couple of days of picks, and really what that does to that overall draft board. You look at Atlanta. Some people had them taking a quarterback, and honestly, I had them taking JJ McCarthy, my very first mock, and I said, even last podcast, I said, look, they're a quarterback away from really having a solid offense. You've got Bijan, you've got Tyler Algier, you've got Drake London, and you've got Kyle Pitts. You don't need to take a rookie quarterback. You need a veteran. They bring in Kirk Cousins. Now they can focus on either another receiver to pair with Drake London. Wouldn't that be scary? Or Dallas Turner is sitting right there at number 8. This is a franchise that I think maybe a little gun shy to pull the trigger on a first round edge rusher after Vic Beasley was a bit of a disappointment coming as a top 10 pick. But I think Dallas Turner really has to be the guy, unless Rome Odunze and Malik Nabers sitting there. I think it'd be hard to pass on either of those guys to team up with Drake London. But that edge rush group, I just don't see a ton of guys to really get excited about there on day 2 as I would Dallas Turner. Receivers, there are a lot of deep. It's a deep class. There are a lot of guys that you could be pulling the trigger on there on day 2, top of day 2, to get a receiver like that. So that's one area. You look at the Raiders picking up Christian Wilkins. Christian Wilkins takes care of that defensive tackle spot that a lot of people were thinking they were using that 13th overall pick for. I think ultimately that 13th overall pick, I'm looking at that cornerback spot. I think if you get Quinyon Mitchell, be that lockdown number 1, pair him with Jack Jones. Look, you got to see Patrick Mahomes twice. You got to see Justin Herbert twice. You get a lockdown corner to meet Quinyon Mitchell as CB1. Pick him up at number 13 overall, and then look to potentially trade back into round 1 to get Michael Penix Jr. You brought in Gardner Minshew to be the that bridge quarterback, if you will, and that takes them out of the running for Justin Fields. So why not go after that corner? That makes a whole lot of sense to me, especially now that you've got Christian Wilkins to really take care of the interior. You line him up next to Max Crosby. It could be a dynamic duo for sure. So just a couple of the conversations that have already come out of free agency, and we've got a lot more to discuss that's really going to shake up my mock draft. I was working on a second mock draft, and then some of the free agency hits, and I've got to change some of my narrative up just a bit. So it's going to take me a little bit to kind of get everything adjusted with that, and hopefully I can get all of that together quickly so that I can go ahead and release another mock draft, and we can go ahead and talk through some of the picks. But look, free agency is in full swing. We'll be able to talk about team needs and where we can kind of address things. We'll start talking about my mock drafts, get into first round, day 2, day 3, what to expect, look at the positions and some of the rankings there, and also play by the numbers. I love playing the draft by the numbers, looking at really over the last 3, 4, 5 years, how many position players were drafted, what does that look like, how many in each of the rounds. Really study that. What does that look like across the board, and see if we can predict based on those numbers and see really how things have checked out. So lot to cover, obviously, and the draft isn't until the end of April, so we've got a lot of time to really start diving in and doing a deep study on a lot of these players, and really not only that, what the teams are going to be doing, or at least what we think they're going to be doing, and just based on the activity in free agency and the landscape of their team, what history tells us with some of these franchises as well. So a lot to cover, and I look to start ramping up my podcast, try to bring more of this coverage to you. And so with that, for ReadyForTheDraft.com, this has been the Ready for the Draft podcast. I've been your host, Gregg Schutze. Take care, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your week. And until next time, I am out of here.